I can't speak highly enough about San Diego. I'm so happy we moved here. It's a beautiful city. It has over 500 species of birds or something like that. It has amazing clean beaches. There's 4 or 5 of them that are protected. So there's no glass. There's wild animals. There's seals. Amazing food. If you want the big city thing, you go downtown. If you want the country feeling, you go up into the north and to the east. It's 2 hours from LA, an hour and a half from Disney. So you could do a day trip. We've done day trips to Disney. I think 45 minutes to Legoland. Almost anywhere in the city, or 10 to 15 to 30 minutes next to a beach. Big, beautiful wineries. If you go out to the east, you get the desert. You can go stargazing. I know people who go out and camp out in the desert and explore stuff like that. So it's a beautiful, amazing city. If you ever want to make a cool weekend trip, come on out, stay downtown, just hang out. There's ships, there's museums. Great city. I found out that it has a 15-mile wide border with Mexico, but it's the busiest international border crossing in the world. It's right on the border of Tijuana, so people will walk over the border just for lunch, to shop, to work. Just an amazing, amazing area. You get a lot of different cultures here. You hear all these different languages. So you can imagine that the announcement of these tariffs really messed with a lot of people's heads in this city. They were very, very concerned. Not only that, but people in general, because a lot of the Mexican-made goods and going to and from, it comes through here. There's a very big port here and everything as well. So it's a very trade-dependent area. But we are a very trade-dependent country, so everybody's up in arms about it. But I think it is important for us all to agree on what this is. Remember, I'm not an economist, so if you have more information or more detailed information, please tell me. And if you can hear my cat scratching her litter box in the background, good on you. Tariffs are, if, let's say, literally using my example, Mexico makes something, and I here in San Diego buy it from Mexico. I'm a business owner, and there's a lot of businesses like this around there. They bring art over, food products, all sorts of stuff, clothes, lots and lots of clothes, cars. So let's say I'm buying Mexican-made products. I go down to the port to pick up my products, and the products I spend $1,000 on the pallet, let's say. With a 10% tariff, that would mean that I'd have to pay $1,100. Me as the American company, me as the American citizen with the American company, the distributor, not Mexico, not the person who's sending it to me, but I go down there and I have to write an additional 10% that one, on top. So I pay them $1,100 where it used to be $1,000 check to get my stuff out of storage. They give me my stuff, I go and sell it. So where I would normally maybe sell that pallet for, it wouldn't be $1,000, it would be, whatever markup it was, I would have to tack on some extra profit, or I would eat it. Meaning that if let's say I had a 10% tariff on $1,000 pallet of toys, that's only $100. I don't want to scare off my customers, so I just eat into my own profits. I do stuff like maybe I lay people off to make up the cost difference. I find some other way around it, and I eat the cost so that you as the consumer do not see the price go up on the toy. So that if the toy was $50, it's still $50 instead of like $52.50 or whatever it would be. Fill in the blank with your example, right? So prices will generally raise. They have examples of this happening in Trump's previous administration. Biden continued those tariffs, so Biden's not non-guilty in this scenario either. Not only that, but Biden placed, I believe it was 100%. I'll link it. I'll link all this stuff into the description, and if I forget to, let me know so I can give it to you in a comment. Biden placed, I believe, it was 100% tariff on Chinese-made EVs, electric vehicles. The quote that I found that is the best quote ever is, yes, and I'm paraphrasing here, but yes, tariffs protect consumers. It protects them from paying low prices. So it's kind of a snarky comment, but still, it's absolutely true. Prices will raise, not in all areas. Some companies will completely eat the tariff and some won't. But we're not talking about 10% tariffs anymore. On China, which is where probably almost all of these toys are made, except for BMC, which I'll get to, and some of my brick toys up top, made from Kobe, which is a Polish company, I believe. Almost all of these are made in China. Take a moment as you're watching this video or you're holding your Chinese-made phone and look around, and you will see, you can just count how many of the things that you have were made in China, and how you as a consumer benefited from those cheap prices. But basically, they say it'll raise funds. So if I go and I have to pay the U.S. government that extra 10% on that $1,000 pallet, that $100, that 10% of that $1,000 pallet that I paid, is extra revenue that goes into the United States coffer. That is essentially a tax. So tariffs are taxes on goods. Now, if you look at our deficit, U.S. deficit, compared to how much you'd have to actually pay down that deficit, even with the numbers they're putting out, it's nowhere near the amount you would need to pay down the deficit. That's what a tax does. Taxes raise revenue. It gives the government money. That's why we want to pay taxes as citizens. Yes, taxes are out of control. Especially here in San Diego, you get taxes on the pricing in here is insane. But the argument is that money goes into helping build schools, keeping roads alive, and no potholes, paying for cops, firefighters, all the water infrastructure, whatever. It's supposed to do all that stuff, and that's good. That's why we're supposed to be happy to pay taxes, as long as they're not out of control, which they can be. Essentially, because Mexico, who's sending the $1,000 pallet of goods to me, is losing business because their prices are now higher here in the U.S. Mexico company might want to come to America to avoid those tariffs and just invest and build a factory here, paying American workers or whoever, paying American wages. The idea is that these tariffs will force these companies, Mexico Toy Company, to come here to America and build here, give us back our manufacturing that we had in the glory days of the 50s and the 40s and the 60s, where a man could buy a house, for whatever on one salary and have 4 kids. So the idea is that back then, I started at age 17 in a factory cutting up chicken or whatever, building a car, let's say, in the 1960s, and I was able to work 50 years there and then retire and give my kids a future and, have my pension and all that stuff like that. That doesn't happen anymore. So a lot of people bemoan that by saying we've lost the ability to manufacture stuff here. But there are a lot of jobs available here that Americans simply don't want to do. Look at a lot of the really hard jobs like picking strawberries or, working in the fields, stuff like that. Alaska is a great example. They basically catch a bunch of fish. They need to process that fish, freeze it, and get it down to the rest of the United States for sale. Well, they depend on migrants. So that's one of the arguments, is that if you can have a high enough tariff or discourage a Mexican toy company from staying in Mexico and getting their cheap labor and sending it here for cheap and destroying our products because our products are too expensive because we have to pay for high labor, high infrastructure costs. Now you have to ask yourself, has the economy of the U.S. been in free fall? Have we been raped and pillaged? Literally, as Trump is quoted as saying, I can link it in the description if you want. And meanwhile, we have a low unemployment rate. It's not perfect here by any means, but we have a low unemployment rate, and we mostly have the up and coming, rising economy, most powerful economy in the world. The idea is that this Mexican toy company is ripping us off because they can get away with all this illegal stuff, sinister cheap toys, and Americans don't buy the American stuff. Another pro for tariffs is that it can protect, and it has been shown to protect, let's say, a new industry or an aging industry. So if you have, 10,000 people who work at a car factory or involved in car stuff in a certain region in the United States or whatever country it is, hotshot new guy comes in and wanting to sell his dirt cheap goods there, you can use tariffs to kind of help protect that fledgling new or aging industry, so it has time to kind of build up or time to retool or to get smarter about it or whatever. So there's others as well. Raises revenue and also encourages factories to be built here. That's the general kind of gist of the arguments from the Trump administration on why tariffs are so necessary. He envisions and has even said that within no time there'll be millions of workers here, but we'll have to see if that pans out. The truth of the matter is if you are a company A, Mexico Toy Company, these tariffs get to 104% like they do on China. It gets to be so, you're selling so few products now because there's cheaper ones available in the USA or whatever, or you're tired of your customers complaining, whatever it is. your distributor's complaining they're having to pay that extra 104% on your goods, or in our case, extra $100 on top of your $1,000 pallet of toys, that you go, okay, well, I'm going to go ahead and build a factory in the United States. How long does that take? It takes at least 3 to 10 years to get a factory going, licensing, training people, hiring people, safety stuff, blah, 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 blah. Learning all that kind of stuff takes a long, long time. So anybody who has said that tariffs will help increase manufacturing in no time, built factories here in no time, that's not true. Do we as Americans really want to wait 5 to 10 years for our iPhones to be $2,600 instead of just buying one from China for $1,000? So having said that, let's get to the cons of it. Basically, cons, the first con is, like I said, is a tariff is a tax. You as the consumer, or as the person who is buying the good from the other country, is going to pay the tariff. The company sent it to you, so Mexican toy company doesn't pay the tariff. We pay the tariff, or the distributor, the person buying those goods, so they can then send them to us as the toy collector guy or whatever. That instability, in that unknown factor, can make companies again be hesitant about building their factory in the United States. I mean, just think about it. If you're a Mexican toy company and you're selling $1,000 pallet to me, and I did the math and I said, well, sure, if I had my own factory in the U.S. and I was able to avoid the tariff, maybe I could, lower the price or whatever. The problem there is that you also have to factor in the time to make the factory, the time to train people, and all that kind of stuff. So, for example, if we get an alcoholic beverage from France, like our champagne, for example, he wants to tax or whatever. I haven't seen the latest numbers on that. But let's say if you tax or you tariff that champagne, it's not like just champagne drinkers, me going to the store to buy a bottle of champagne, pay more. The restaurant has to pay more. If the restaurant has to pay more, maybe they have to start cutting costs or rising prices somewhere else. So maybe their desserts go up. Maybe they lay some people off so it's busier. So then the restaurant doesn't get as much good business. They get worse reviews. They shut down. When you start to have this chaos injected into a system, people just get crazy. They don't know what to do. That's why the stock market's going crazy. So some of the evidence for this is that you might already be getting the same emails I'm getting, which is from a toy company. USA Gundam Store, for example, sent one. I know that Four Horsemen, who does Mythic Legions, I believe, has a notice on their Facebook page or their shop or whatever. USA Gundam Store did something which I thought was very telling. I'm not saying that they're doing anything wrong, but something smart on their part, I guess, is they said, here is a list of the items we already have in stock. That means they're already here and paid for. Companies are already starting to have issues with these tariffs and sending that issue or sending that concern to us. So if you skipped ahead, this is the toy part for why I believe we do not make toys in the United States. Well, the key here is that we do make toys in the United States. I want to give the example of BMC Toys. I don't know what that stands for, but it's B as in Baker, M as in Mary, C as in Charlie. I'll link them in the description. And I've always talked about them as one of my 5 to 7 to 10 companies who do not manufacture in China for the most part. They do manufacture some in China, but they manufacture right here in the United States. They do army men, basically, like army tanks, plastic army men, the classic army man that you're used to, little sets and stuff like that, and army women, animals, aliens, cowboys and Indians and stuff like that, all sorts of kind of classic toys from the past, and they have manufacturing actually here in the United States. They make some of my top 50 favorite toys of all time. 2 of their toys are some of my favorites. So we do make toys here. So Mexican toy company who makes robot and sells the $1,000 pallet to me for $1,000, now tariffed at, let's say, 100% or 10%, whatever it is. I, as an American, as a USA citizen or whatever, can go and start a factory and make my own toys here. Or if I'm a toy inventor or designer, I can take it to a factory here in the United States and I can have them make this robot. Is it possible? Yes. Is it being done? No. Basically, China is able to make these dirt cheap toys and send them over or send them through Mexico or whatever for several different reasons. As a point of example, my B-Duck, which I've showed you before, and I love this example because B-Duck, if you look at the unboxing, is like a suitcase. It was 50-something, so $60-something, 64, something like that, with shipping from Big Bad Toy Store. It's a huge model. It's a ton of high quality, well-designed plastic. The instruction manual's designed well. There's English when you need it, color photos, all that stuff for $60. Just the box alone, I don't understand how they're able to ship it over here for $50. There's several reasons why China can make cheap toys and why we don't make cheap toys here. First of all, if it's not an official license, meaning if it is a ripoff, they can make those way cheaper than we could because we're not paying Marvel for their Iron Man toy. China can make a rip-off one and call it, Steel Boy or whatever and sell it. Yes, they do have lax or can have lax health and safety standards, or they don't enforce them as much. Again, millions and millions of workers. There's people being taken advantage of. Yes. And while I go down this list, if you're going, well, that's because China's evil, China's bad, I would like you to ask if this same stuff happens here in the United States of America, and it absolutely does. That doesn't make it right in any case, in any example, but it's just to say that in every country of our size and our economies, we're the number one and number two largest economies in the world, you're going to have some bad stuff happening. Also, it's a massive country that has a ton of natural resources. Just look at China on the map. It's huge. They have a lot of natural resources, and they have a lot of access to natural resources. They can get them from other countries, neighboring countries, everybody. This is what happens when you have world trade, but they have themselves a lot of natural resources they can pull from. There is another bad thing that we have benefited as cheap toy lovers is there is an environmental cost, environmental price that we have paid, all the world, but especially China has paid for their ability to create lots of cheap goods. That means that because environmentally they weren't so worried about it, the government wasn't pushing it as hard and saying, hey, look, you can't be poisoning and killing people with your lead in the water, whatever it is, that company was able to just go for it. This is, extrapolate that over decades or whatever, and you'll have entire swaths. Or another reason that they are able to do this is they have special economic zones where if you build your factory here, there'll be 1,000 factories in this giant, like city-sized place that are able to create and grow. They've done that over decades, so they are able to create the latest technologies. They have the stamping and the mold making and all that kind of stuff, technologies already built into the system, so they're able to make those things cheaper because over here we don't know how to do that. They have the special economic zones, they have these massive areas, they have lots of natural resources, dirt cheap labor. Sometimes we're side-eyeing them about that, but again, we have that here as well in some cases, many cases. And so they have a lot of basic stuff that you need to get really good at cheap manufacturing. They also have subsidies from the government, meaning the government says, hey, we'll give you a little extra money if you build this factory over here. So they're a manufacturing country. We are a let's buy your shit country. And they've also got decades of infrastructure being built. What's really interesting about China now and really kind of crazy is their electrification, meaning that they're going more into like clean energy, solar energy, which is just free. It's clean. Their electrification of their vehicles. They're really not saying they're not polluting anymore or anything like that. That's ridiculous. But what I'm saying is they're really, really pushing a lot of that kind of thing now. And I wouldn't be surprised if before too long you see those massive factories that are pumping out dirt cheap stuff maybe even get a little cheaper because they're not even having to import as much fuel for their furnaces or whatever. They're just using solar energy. They're storing it. All that stuff they're pursuing, which is what you should be doing. That's free energy. The wind, the solar. Doesn't mean it works all the time perfectly, but that's just smart. So that is my super long video about really why we're not making toys here is because there was a guy on the news the other day was talking about, and I posted this on my YouTube community page, but he was talking about making little toy Jesuses that you squeeze his hand and he says a Bible scripture, random Bible scripture. Sounds like a cool toy if you're into Jesus and stuff. But I think he was selling for $40, something like that. He gets them from China. He said he gets them from China because they're better and cheaper than we can make here. So he has a choice. He can spend enough money and make them here in the U.S. He can pay the money for the tooling. He can build his own factory. He can pay the workers 10 times more than what they get paid in China, whatever it is. He can build the robots. He can do all that stuff. But he wanted to go with an option that was cheaper and better. That's what China's able to do. He, as a company, gets to grow because he's selling these cheap goods, hire more Americans in his American company. Maybe the Chinese workers that work for him over there get paid a little more. It's good for everybody generally. So that, in my opinion, is why we're not manufacturing here in the United States. Would I like to see it happen? Yes. Do I think it's going to happen? No. I think the U.S. will still be a fantastic place to make a living, to have a factory, to buy high quality goods, furniture. You can still buy, you don't have to buy the cheap IKEA stuff that falls apart everybody complains about. Go to a furniture maker and buy a table for them for $10,000 or $1,000. It will last you a lifetime. But if you just want something to prop up in your kid's room for, college or whatever, for $50, go to IKEA. We all make these choices, and that's why I think naturally, as a country, a rich country, we've gone the way of cheap goods from China and other places, and why that is kind of has lifted everybody up involved in the chain. Everybody's getting more money. Everybody's doing better. It definitely has its cons, but it definitely has its pros. I don't think these tariffs are going to last that long. I think it's not a negotiating thing because Trump, frankly, isn't really good at that stuff. He bankrupted a casino. But I think in the end, it's just going to kind of cause a lot of chaos, cause a lot of money being lost, and then the money being made back again from rich people who own corporations, Elon Musk, people like that. So sure, it's going to send some kind of message, but it's going to be a message of chaos. And really, in the end, we're not going to have toys being made in the United States. You're not going to pay that much more for a robot from the United States because you don't want to. Might not have that money. I mean, look around my room. If I could show you this office, you would see, look around your own office, how much is made cheaply from China and other countries. It's kind of ridiculous. So have a good one, everybody. Let me know what you think. Talk to you later. Bye-bye.